I'm 29, male, married to Ava, 27 for 2 years. Ava and I grew up in a small town where everyone knew each other and most people attended the same local church. We moved to that town when I was 10 years old, and we attended the same church as Ava's parents and were raised there. A couple of years ago, I graduated from college and decided to return to the town I grew up in. I was already used to the calm, quiet, and simple life there, and that was when Ava and I started dating. I had been crushing on her for years, and finally, the opportunity came. We were so in love, and married after dating for a year. The church and our parents were pleased when Ava and I married, and they even contributed to our small wedding. Now the thing is, Ava and I never got intimate before our wedding. She insisted that we waited until our wedding night, and after all of my persuasions failed, I agreed. Unlike me, who wasn't so committed to church anymore, Ava was still fully devoted and literally attended all the church programs, meetings, and all. She was even a part of the evangelism team, and every weekend she would go out with the church team to pray and preach to people. While we dated, we could only kiss each other, and she never agreed to sleep over at my house. She claimed she was keeping herself from me, and it was also against God's wish for us to do it before marriage. Throughout the time, I waited for Ava and I to get married and finally make love to each other. I thought she was a virgin. She never told me she wasn't, so I assumed she was. It was on the night of our wedding that I found out she wasn't. She told me she had been doing it with her previous boyfriends, but decided to stop and turn a new leaf. It took me a while to shake off the disappointment, and I tried to not let it ruin our new marriage. Aside from finding out that she had been with other men in her past, which she did not tell me before, Ava was a sweetheart. She was respectful and treated me well. She also had a soothing and energetic aura, and was very welcoming to both the people she knew and strangers. I worked as a driver for a logistics company while Ava decided to be a stay-at-home wife so she could have enough time to do God's work. Even though my pay was small, I was trying to keep the errands running. Apart from my salary, Ava received a stipend from the church for her social work. She used that money to take care of her needs. After we married, I expected Ava's commitment to the church to drop, so we could focus more on building our family together. I didn't even mind that she stayed at home and did nothing. I expected that we would spend a lot of time together, but that didn't happen. She went to church nearly every day. Suppose she wasn't going for a midweek service. In that case, she'd be going for a departmental meeting, evangelism, or something else that was still related to church every day. Most times, it would get so bad that we wouldn't even get to spend time together because she would go to church almost every evening. By the time she'd be home in the evening, she would only eat and go to bed. On weekends, Ava would leave the house in the morning for her meetings, charity events, or something else, and she would return in the afternoon, only to go out again and return at night. I complained about her being overly committed to her church and not spending time with me, but every time I did, she told me that I should have known what I was signing up for when I asked her to marry me. This was always her response. She would walk out on me every time she said it. My complaints often would lead to a fight, and as a result, she would go 2 or 3 days without talking to me. Months before we married, we talked about children and planned to have a child at least 1 year after marriage. Since we weren't so close while we were dating, we wanted to use the first year to get to know ourselves, and so far, that didn't turn out well. In the space of 1 year, Ava had turned into a very different person. She wasn't the Ava I knew while we were dating, and I didn't envision the marriage to be the way it was. It's not like we had a lot of issues. Our only problem was her consistently attending church and how it got in between our marriage. No matter how I complained, she never listened. Because of the nature of my job, I couldn't join her for the midweek services and the rest of the programs. Even if I was free, I preferred to do other things with my time. Each time I complained to her, she made it look like I was the devil himself, and I was trying to convince her to turn away from God, but that wasn't it. I was only trying to tell her to cut down on the activities and make time for us. After a year passed and we didn't have a child, I decided to talk to her about it, but she didn't seem interested. She blatantly told me that she was busy doing the Lord's work and instead of me supporting her, I was bothered about making babies. I was tired of her habits at that point, so I reported her to her parents. I told them everything Ava had been doing, how she neglected me, the house, and her wifely responsibilities. When her parents heard that, they were surprised Ava acted that way. A few days after I reported her to her parents, Ava confronted me. She was so livid. She even insulted me and called me names because I reported her to her parents. As I share this story, I regret not walking away from the time her changes and neglect started. I thought about that several times, but because I loved her, I turned a deaf ear to all her abuse, ignored her negligence, and still pushed for us to make things work between us. Despite Ava's fluctuating attitude and her neglecting me to do the Lord's work as she claimed, I still loved her and continued to treat her with love. I did most of the cleaning because she was barely around to take care of the house. I cooked, did the laundry, went grocery shopping, and cared for the other house-related things. We continued like this for another year, but she got pregnant at the end of the second year. I was very happy when Ava broke the news that she was pregnant. I knew that as her pregnancy grew, she would reduce how much she went to church, which was exactly what happened. At the beginning of her pregnancy, she was still very active and continued to attend church, but from her second trimester, she began to stay at home. Also, one of the reasons Ava could not go to church steadily anymore was because her pregnancy had some complications and the doctor advised her not to do anything stressful. When Ava stopped attending the church activities, her church members began visiting her instead. On some days, they would come as a group, and on other days, some people would visit individually. Almost every time they came to see Ava, they would come with gifts, fruits, and other things to help her cravings. I wasn't surprised at their show of love and concern because Ava was so dedicated to her church. Most families knew her right from when she was a kid and treated her as their own daughter. Aside from the church members who visited us regularly, another person who dropped by our house every week was our church pastor. He was always the one who came with fruits and stuff for Ava. Whenever our church pastor came, I noticed that Ava always had this glow and excitement on her face, but I didn't see it as anything. Most times, I would return from work in the evening to meet his car parked on our driveway, and sometimes I would leave him at home to buy something or take care of something outside. I believe there was nothing to be bothered about because he was our pastor and Ava would never do anything with him that didn't please God. For weeks, our pastor showed up at our house and continued bringing stuff for Ava. I continued to work as a logistics company driver and had a side job in the evenings. With Ava's pregnancy, many things had to change at home, and the demands increased. I had to be very supportive and do everything she asked for. There were some nights I couldn't even sleep well because of her. All of these affected me a lot, but I had to do everything because she needed enough rest. On the days our pastor came to visit Ava, one of the things that stood out was the amount of money he usually gave her. When it happened the first time he visited, I thought he was only being generous, but when it happened repeatedly, I began to question Ava. It didn't seem right to me that her pastor gave her so much money every week. When I asked Ava, she said I was making a big deal out of it, and that her pastor was only helping her as he would help any other person. But after several arguments, she told me she would stop getting money from him. I wanted to believe her about her pastor helping her like he would help other people, but a part of me told me something was not right. As her pastor continued to visit her, I began to feel uncomfortable about it. They were getting closer, and I knew there were some things they didn't discuss in my presence. I remember once, her pastor visited one afternoon and I offered to make him fresh juice. I left him and Ava in the living room. On the way back from the kitchen, I could hear them whispering out something from the corridor, but as soon as I stepped into the living room, they pretended to be talking in their normal voices. Another time, I returned home from work, and as soon as I entered the house, our pastor took his leave. It felt awkward, and my instincts kept telling me something was wrong. Ava behaved differently that evening after our pastor left, even confirming my suspicion. I thought the suspicion would be something I'd easily shake off, but each time I saw Ava and our pastor together, the suspicion returned. Also, because I complained about the amount of money Ava received from our pastor, she stopped telling me about it and started hiding it. I wouldn't have known she kept getting money from her pastor if I had not cleaned one of her clothes chores one day. When I stumbled on the wrap of money, I was so surprised. I was also disappointed that Ava had been deceiving me. She made me believe she stopped taking money from her pastor. Initially, I wanted to confront her about the money, but I knew it would blow up my chances of finding out what was happening between them. I had witnessed our pastor pray for her and the baby many times, and she claimed it was mostly what brought him to her house, but that reason still didn't sit well with me. So to find out what was happening, I decided to buy those small cameras you could easily set up in your house without being detected. I kept them in strategic positions in our living room so they could cover all the angles. I also kept 2 in our room, 1 in the kitchen and 1 in the bathroom. At this point, I strongly suspected that our pastor was stealing church money and giving it to Ava to keep for him. I believe this was the only reason our pastor would give her so much money every week, but I was in for a big surprise. Our pastor dropped by the house 2 days after my setup. I knew he would come to our house that day, so I left work early and parked near my street. My intention was to confront them after I saw and heard everything, but what I saw changed the direction of everything that happened afterward. So I was in my car watching the footage of my house from my phone. I watched our pastor as he entered my house, and after he confirmed from Ava that I wasn't home, he began to unbutton his shirt. On the other hand, Ava wore her pink bathrobe with nothing underneath. She took off the bathrobe and exposed her whole body to our pastor. My heart skipped as I watched the footage because I knew what would happen next. I could not even believe what my eyes saw. It was beyond what I had expected. I'll admit that I was unsure of what to do, but hearing Ava moan in pleasure drove me insane. I didn't even remember exiting my car and running to my house. I was so enraged, and I opened the door with force and jumped on our pastor. I knew I could not touch Ava because of her pregnancy, so I took it out on our pastor. If not for Ava's intervention, the pastor might have passed out. I was heartbroken. I didn't even know what to say to them. He ran out of the house with only his underpants on and clothes in his arms. After he left, Ava started sobbing like a sorry little baby. She said it wasn't what I thought, and that our pastor had come to pray for her and the baby. I could not believe she was still trying to lie to me after I caught her red-handed as her pastor was doing her. I was so mad, but I tried to control my anger. At that moment, it struck me that Ava had been sleeping with our pastor, and it explained why he kept giving her money. I asked her how long her affair with our pastor had been going on, but she denied having anything to do with him. From how she was going, I knew she wouldn't admit it, so I kicked her out of my house, and the only thing she had on her was her bathrobe and flip-flops. Outside the house, Ava kept pleading with me to let her in, until the neighbors came to ask what was going on. Luckily for her, one of them offered to drive her to her parents' house, which was how she left. Before she arrived at her parents' house, I ensured I called them first and I told them what I had seen. Her parents didn't believe me until Ava got to their house, and that was when they started blowing my phone. I refused to take their calls because I was in no mood to talk. All of these happened 3 weeks ago. Now I have been unable to think straight. Ava is in all of my thoughts, and it's so painful that despite all of my efforts to be a great husband to her, she cheated on me with our pastor. Right now, I'm so confused and don't know what to do. I always looked forward to us raising our children together and not as divorced parents. At the same time, I cannot live with a cheat. No, I haven't told the church yet about her infidelity. She and her pastor have been calling me every day, and our pastor has been texting me and asking that we meet and talk. Now for the first update. Thank you for your comments. You are all right. I shouldn't have ignored the red flag from the beginning. They were staring me in the face, but I kept holding on to our marriage. So 2 days ago, which was Sunday, I met our pastor in church. It was an open ground like some of you suggested. Funnily enough, he was shaking when he saw me come inside the church that morning. I had skipped church for 5 weeks, and seeing me made him scared. After service, he called me to his office and begged me not to tell anyone what I had seen. At least he was smarter than Ava. I used the opportunity to ask him how long he and Ava had been having an affair. Guess what, guys? He said it was before Ava and I started dating. This means he'd been doing it with her while she had been deceiving me. I was literally shattered when I heard that. Ava did not only betray me by cheating on me, but she also made a fool out of me. I wanted to confront him, but couldn't because so many people were in the church. Also, my confrontation would ruin my plans for him, so I stayed calm. I was expecting to see Ava in church too, but she wasn't there. Even her parents did not come. Before I caught Ava and our pastor, I had heard rumors that our pastor was doing the young girls in the church, but no one was bold enough to confront him about it. At that point, I didn't need to ask if he had been using the church money because it was apparent that the church made weekly donations, and I guess he used the money to settle his needs. After our pastor pleaded with me not to tell anyone about his affair with Ava, I told him I would let it slide on one condition: that he would tell the whole church he'd been using the church money for his personal needs. I wanted to teach him a lesson, and surprisingly, he agreed. He said he would announce the following Sunday and ask the church to forgive him. Deep down, I knew he was lying. He would not agree to embarrass himself like that unless he had ulterior motives. Just yesterday, Ava used a different number to call. In the past few weeks, she had called repeatedly until I blocked her. She said she had been to my house several times, but no one responded. I left the house 3 days after I kicked her out because I could not get the picture of them doing it in my living room out of my head. She said she didn't want to raise the baby alone, and I should give her a second chance to show that she has changed. She has no idea what's coming to her. I told her I could only take responsibility for the child if we carried out a paternity test, and the results showed that I was the child's father. Once we do this, I will make another update. Thank you everyone for your comments. Now for the second update. Hi everyone. I can't thank this community enough for the level of help that I've gotten. I also apologize for taking weeks to make this update. So, after I told Ava about the paternity test, she refused to do it, but her parents pushed her. She said I was being difficult, and I wanted to make things difficult for her. My guess is she suspected I wasn't the baby's father. Eventually, we did the paternity test, and I wasn't the baby's father. Somehow, I suspected this would happen from the moment she kicked against the idea of carrying out the paternity test. Her parents were so disappointed when they found out, and they asked her who was responsible for her child. She couldn't even answer them. I knew who it was, and told them it was the same pastor. There's no need to ask if I was heartbroken because words cannot describe how I felt. We got the test results on the day of our church's midweek service, so I decided to give our pastor a little visit. Even if the baby was mine, I had already decided to divorce Ava, and that's why I reached out to a lawyer to process our divorce papers, and everything was ready by the time of the confrontation. When I got to church, I walked straight to the front and drew everyone's attention. Our pastor was the one preaching and refused to hand me the mic when I requested it. He knew why I was there, and he kept blinking as a signal to stop me, but I ignored him. When he refused to give me the mic, I resorted to talking at the top of my voice so everyone could hear me. I exposed our pastor and told everyone the truth, and they gasped in surprise. I knew it was impossible to show the footage to everyone, so I played the voice recording of the conversation from my last meeting with our pastor where he admitted he was having an affair with Ava and using the church money for personal use. He didn't know I recorded our conversation that day, and I didn't tell him either. I even forwarded that voice recording to several church social media groups of which I was a part. The expression on his face when he heard the recording was just everything. He was surprised I recorded our conversation, so it was enough evidence in case he tried denying it. With what everyone had heard, I was sure all of that was enough to wreck his career and marriage, and it did. The church was so disappointed in him, and he was demoted. The church also lost so many members because they knew our pastor as a man of purity and someone who preached against sexual immorality all the time. So they were let down when they found out he wasn't even practicing what he preached. As for Ava, I served her with divorce despite all her cries and pleas from her and her parents. Currently, she's very close to giving birth, and she is living with her parents. Despite being so disappointed, her parents still took her in. I also stopped going to church after I exposed our pastor. As expected, the news had spread so fast around town, and almost everyone is talking about it now. Ava has lost so many friends and well-wishers. The last time I heard about Ava's affair partner, I was told his wife divorced him, and he had been told to show the records of all the money he used for church purposes since he assumed the position of the church pastor. We all know how that will end. I still feel a hurt and pain from Ava's infidelity, but it's better than being married to a cheat. Thank you everyone for supporting me this far. I appreciate you all. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. See you next time.